This webinar, by the way, will be recorded. We'll send you a copy of the webinar and the slides towards the end of this week. Let's move on. Let's show that even more clearly. What you can see here is the efficiency and effectiveness of several organizations when comparing crisis mitigation methods. The green organizations are the organizations that have been using agile crisis management. And without getting into too many details, what you can clearly see is that they've been able to work their way out of the crisis in a much more effective and efficient way. Now, there are some other outliers, but by and large, the green companies, which are the agile crisis management companies, be much more effective at working their way out of the crisis. All right, so who are we? Inanc, would you take it away, please?
Okay, hello everybody, and dankjewel. I don't know how is my pronunciation, and my name is Inanc, which is also a little bit difficult to pronounce as for the Dutch-speaking people. Anyhow, Inanc. I'm the founder and managing partner of Haga Business Consultancy. Haga Business Consultancy is a Dutch-Turkish joint venture company located in The Hague, in the Netherlands, and in Istanbul. Our Turkey representative is Sebnem. We are a research backgrounded company, and we have wide experience, especially on strategic communication, crisis management, corporate and public affairs, and organizational development. We think that we are a dynamic company who like to use agile approach in most of our projects, and we are cooperating with Organize Agile for more than 1 year. We are giving together trainings and consultancy both in Turkey and in the Netherlands. And this is our first common webinar experience that we are learning all together. We hope that we can contribute a little bit more with our past crisis management experience and with the experience of Organize Agile. So that's all.
Okay, maybe I can continue, Michael.
Yeah.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Other than being the managing partner and Turkey representative of Haga, I'm an industrial engineer having 17 years of corporate experience in international companies on manufacturing, lean management, project management, HR, coaching, team coaching, and agile. And other than being Turkish and living in a geography where as a person you grew with challenges and maybe some crisis, I was also a critical member of a crisis management team in my ex-company, where the crisis not only affected the 4 plants and 2,000 employees in our Turkish operations, but also the whole supply chain of this international company and also a specific packaging industry. So I hope the things that we share today will resonate with you and also create some value. Welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebnem. Then briefly for me, Michiel van Gerven, Dutch. I work for Organize Agile. We're based in the Netherlands and in New York City. We're an agile boutique consultancy. We do training, organizational transformation. Personally, I do a lot of work for the Dutch police, both training and team coaching, and some transformation work in several departments as well. And other than that, I'm involved as a transformation lead at a large insurance company. And today, as Sebnem and Inanc Manage, we'll be combining our experiences on agile and crisis management to bring you this webinar. So let's push on. As we briefly mentioned before, together we're able to offer a very portfolio from stretching from research and analysis to organizational transformation and everything in between. We've been doing this for just over a year. We've participated a lot on HR training and other trainings as well, both in Turkey and in the Netherlands. And today, we're getting started with you on agile crisis management. All right, so what is a crisis?
So maybe I can begin with that, and we can maybe begin with what a crisis is. A crisis can be derived from external factors and from internal factors, and it can have technical or economic results or social and organizations results. But whatever the type of crisis is, it's important to think that a crisis happening in one axis of that area can have an impact on the other side of our work lives. Because what a crisis is indeed an event that is happening or is expected to happen, which leads us to an unstable and dangerous situation and affect all of the human beings, the people, and sometimes the whole society. For example, nowadays, all of us are really aware of that. We are in the middle of a global health crisis, and we realize that we are affected all together. For example, this health crisis, derived completely from an external factors, nowadays has the potential to create other crises in the other parts of our workplace. For example, we all realize that the turnover of the companies are decreasing sharply. People moral, employees moral are affected. Maybe it will result some loss of key staffs in the very near future of the companies. There are indeed 4 common elements in crisis. A crisis is a threat to the organization or to the society. It contains some level of surprise. It requires a short time for decision making and for the action. And indeed, a crisis is a process of transformation where the old systems and for old mechanisms cannot be maintained anymore. So we can pass maybe to the other slides. It's important to remember that every crisis has a huge impact in our lives, and it can have a potential to create other mini crises, because you cannot just try to encapsulate a crisis in a furnace and forget about the rest. Everything will trigger other things. It is important, it disrupts our notion of taking for granted. It challenges us to get out of comfort zones, and it changed completely our daily routines. Because of that reason, the crisis has huge impact on our lives. So the question arises, how we can manage the crisis impacts? Can we mitigate them? Yes, if we can manage the crisis as well as we can do, we can decrease the impacts to some extent. It depends on the situation, of course, to which level you can decrease. But the crisis management is not risk management. It contains risk management, but the risk management is only the assessment of the potential threats that can happen and try to find the best solutions to prevent the threats. Crisis management includes risk management, but it's more than that. Also, crisis management is not only preparing long and standardized plans within the companies and to prepare the checklist and to go over this checklist, because as I said in the previous slides, the crisis needs a very limited time for decision making and for the action. And also, every crisis has some different characteristics, and you are in a different environment. For example, almost nobody foresee the effects, the impacts of this global health crisis. Even though we had very long, prepared, standardized plans, we will need to act in a very agile way to overcome the real effect on that altogether as teams. So in short, crisis management is a discipline within the broader context of management, consisting of skills and techniques that require to identify, to assess, to understand, and to cope with the really serious situation. And also, it involves dealing with the threats before, during, and even after they have occurred. It's very important. So we say that we think that after our long experience on crisis management, the best approach is always to stick on critical thinking and be really aware of your unique conjuncture. You really understand your own situation. So you need to have a very clear strategy. And you need to communicate this strategy towards your stakeholders very clearly. So you need to act according to your own strategy. You need to analyze very well your structures, and you need to use your cultural strengths, because you will need your values while you are managing the crisis. And we will talk about this at the next slides. Yeah. Here, for example, I had only one slide. I'm allowed only to use one slide. So we had other cases, but I could only put 3 of them. But at least I could put my first crisis management experience that I was responsible in 2005, TeliaSonera. TeliaSonera is one of the biggest GSM operators in the world. It's a Swedish-Finnish company. They are operating from Norway to Eurasia, Russia, all the ex-Russian countries. And they are a public company. It was a very complex and commercial political crisis. Why? Because during that time, we are talking more than 15 years, by the way, there was almost no Agile at that time. At least in Turkey. The TeliaSonera made the biggest foreign direct investment in Turkey. We are talking about more than 3.5 billion euro. They transacted this money into Turkish accounts in order to get the majority shareholder of the Turkey's biggest GSM operator. But somehow the shares are not transferred. So it was a real shock for the TeliaSonera management. They lost a real bad reputation globally. By the way, all the Swedish and Western investor relations began to criticize the decision and so on. They didn't know how to handle the crisis. I will not go into the detail what we did because we don't have time. But in the end of the day, after the projects that we made, we worked together with a lot of international stakeholders, local stakeholders. They were able to maintain their robust position in Turkey. Plus, they were able to mitigate the risk that they are facing in Eurasia. Eurasia, I mean the ex-Russian countries like Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, these countries that you have to work with a lot of risk. Their reputation increased really efficiently, especially within the opinion leaders, because at the beginning they lost their reputation. And even the strategic reposition and the good crisis management helped them to win the international arbitration cases in Turkey. So everything that the way that you are trying to manage your crisis affect the results after the crisis also is finished. So the other case is A101. You can think A101 like the Albert Heijn of Turkey. It's the biggest retail supermarket chain in Turkey. But besides that, it has listed last year 5th fastest growing retailer in the world. They have more than 9,000 supermarkets in Turkey and more than 50,000 employees. They had also in the middle of a very important crisis in 2017. It was a political and even harassment crisis, and they had a bombardment in social media, because now we are in 2017 and social media was very important to them. The management was under risk to go into jail. They lost their reputation, and even their supply chain did reacted to them, and they stopped to give them the materials. So the customers didn't want to go to their supermarkets because the reputation was so low. So first we managed the political risk, and the political risk completely was mitigated. We worked on the projects to increase their reputation, and we increased the reputation both in the eyes of the government and at the same time customers, and at the same time the supply chain. We stabilized the social media bombardment, plus they gained a lot of social media influencers. We are still working with them, by the way, and they have millions of followers nowadays, and the reputation completely changed. We established many corporate and marketing projects, and we still continue with that. By the way, with TeliaSonera also, we work with 6 years, by the way, after the crisis done, because we will talk about it, but you will have a lot of benefits after the crisis if you manage the hard times really well. The third example is an American manufacturing company. Since they didn't want us to use their logos, I just give a small information about them, but they are also a very important company, and they have presence in all continents. It was an illegal occupation and supply chain crisis. It happened in 2014, at the beginning of 14. There was thousands of employees, and some of the employees illegally occupied the 3 factories in Turkey. It was so important because the company production was important, crucial, and big, so the sector also was influenced by this lockout. The managers were not able to enter into the factories. The media talk days with about it for months. So we worked with them. In the end of the day, we made an impressive employee union agreement, and that was a real first time in Turkey. That was a lot of good media coverage about it. We are appreciated, I mean the company are appreciated via this one. We had increased employee engagement, and in the end of the day, via the projects that we made after the crisis also, we increased the quality and even the productivity. By the way, their headquarters in the Netherlands. Of course, when you are managing a company, you are talking with a lot of stakeholders at the same time. This is the difficult part, but if you can manage it, I mean, you really get the results. So, okay, for further details, we can discuss afterwards.
I think
right. Yeah, so as Anand mentioned, these cases are examples, but we would be happy to answer some questions about these cases towards the end of the webinar.
Yeah. So with lots of experiences actually with crisis management, we use our experience and knowledge and what went well and what didn't went well, and we gathered them to create a model on agile crisis management. I will be in the next slides go in more detail of the critical steps here, but if we just look at it broadly, it's important to make an initial analysis to start to make some decisions. In crisis, we live that we have very limited time. We have to act very quickly. We have to make good decisions. But first, we need to have an initial analysis. Then it's important to have the establishment of the crisis team and really define how they would work so that they could be efficient. In order to stabilize the situation, because in crisis, you are in an acute situation and we need to have a stabilization phase. We need to go there. And as Inanc said, actually, after having a stabilization in the process, it's very important to have the post-crisis development phase where you can really thrive from your crisis. If we can go to the next slide, Michael. So the first phase is the initial analysis phase. As I said, the time is very limited in a crisis situation. So we have to define very quickly, but also clearly and broadly the current situation we are in, because we have to have the right decisions. Otherwise, all the decisions, a small decision that we can make, have a very big impact on our organization or all the other stakeholders. One of the best ways to do this is to get insight from all the external stakeholders and also different employee groups that we have in our organization. In order to get insight from these 5 topics, what are the key stakeholders that would be impacted and what are the key stakeholders that would have an impact on the crisis in a good way or a bad way, and what would be their effect and impact? What will happen to our whole supply chain? We have to understand, we have to get the inside of this. We have to really understand the structure of that company. What is there that would help us to go out from the crisis, and what is going to draw us down? What are the current resources we have that it can help? What are the extra resources and also financials that we would need, and how our financials could be affected? And we also need to understand the organizational culture. I'm not talking about like the posters that we are hanging on the walls, writing the values there, okay, trustability and the other things. I'm really talking about the real culture that we are living in that organization. We have to get the insight from the stakeholders about this, because this would also change your strategy during crisis management. And also we have to understand how this crisis could affect our company reputation and what is the current situation for our reputation. And in crisis situation, we have very limited information and we don't know what will happen. This is our main problem. So we are like in a blur environment. So We don't know what will happen. So we have to prepare possible scenarios when we get all the insight from these stakeholders. And with these scenarios, as Inanc also mentioned previously, we have to define what is our strategic positioning, what is our purpose in this crisis, how we want to go out from this crisis. So we have to define our what we want to achieve, and we have to also define our why, and leave the how to the crisis management team and the other teams. We can go to the next slide, please, Michael. So when we define our what and why, it's very critical to establish our crisis management team, and they should start working in order to stabilize the situation. What are important for the establishment of the crisis management team? The first thing is the crisis management team should be multidisciplined. Let's say you have a employee unrest in one of your organizations, one of your plants. Let's say you are a manufacturing company. This is not only an HR issue. If there is an unrest, the sales also would be affected, the operations would be affected. So you really need to have a multidisciplinary team. Also, you would need external members in that multidisciplinary team. Lawyers, almost 100% in every crisis, we need to have the lawyers in order to understand what could be the legal effects on us and on the other stakeholders. You could need to have some specialized consultants to also work with you. And other important thing is the crisis management team should be empowered. They should have the authority to make decisions in a very quick way, because we don't have time in crisis environments to just have some possible decisions and send them to a manager and just wait for them to decide. Most of the time, the CEOs or the general managers are the main members of crisis management teams. And having a psychological safe environment in this crisis management team is also very important. In crisis environments, I know that this is not easy, because even the members of the crisis management team, maybe the general manager or even the CEO, are going through a change cycle. Maybe they are also in a denial mood, and they also don't feel very well. And you have external members, maybe new lawyers or new consultants that you don't know actually. It's not easy to be psychologically safe. But if these people do not feel this, they cannot be open about their concerns. They cannot be open about their the things that they have heard from their employees. So it is very important to settle this. And the crisis management team also need instant and secure communication tools. The instant part, I think, is obvious, right? Because the time is very limited. But secure part is also important. We will come to the point that the communication should be transparent when we are managing a crisis, but it doesn't mean that we will make all the information open for everybody. We will come to that point. So we really need secure communication tools. We also need scaling. The crisis management team, the main team, would not be enough when we are in a crisis which is affecting the whole organization and whole stakeholders. Let's say if we have the supply chain director in our main crisis team, that supply chain director should have a team of teams where they can work in the details of, let's say, which materials can we bring, which are the critical ones, what could be the possible other solutions. So he or she should have a team of teams, and those teams also should have a clear goal. What is their goal? What is their what and why? And we have to leave the how so that they can really play in their playground and come up with innovative and good solutions. And if you just click once, Michael, it's also very important to include the informal leaders in your organization in the team of teams. The informal leaders are the people who your people in the organization or your stakeholders trust. When we accompany any company to manage their crisis, or when we are one of the members of the crisis management team, and when we make the organizational network analysis in those companies and find the informal leaders, we always see the pattern that the people, the engaged employees you have, let's say the activists or supporters, are trusting some people. And also the unengaged ones, let's say the detractors or reactors, they are also trusting some people. And most of the time, these trusted people, so-called the informal leaders, are similar people. So when there is any decision in the company, or when there is any change, these are the people, the employees or the other stakeholders go and ask, why do you think they have done something like this. Do you think this would be good or bad? So these are the people who people really trust and ask their opinions. So having these informal leaders would make like 50% maybe the communication and engagement work in crisis management. We can go to the next one, please. So you have also seen in our model that communication and engagement should be all the time there while you are managing your crisis, during the crisis and after the post-crisis. When we mean communication, we are not talking about monologues that somebody is just going in town hall meetings or via mails, they are just giving information. We are talking about dialogue. So we have to really listen to our stakeholders, our employees, our shareholders, our customers, and also empathize the situation they are in. We need to also manage the sentiment, not only the sentiment of our employees, but also maybe our managers, because everybody is in a crisis situation, everybody is pushed to a change, probably they didn't want to be in. So it's very normal that they could be in the denial phase or they could be in the resistance phase. So we have to really understand which phase they are in and also manage the sentiment. And when we are talking about communication, our main aim is to build trust within our stakeholders and employees and engage them around our common goal, our strategic goal that we have defined. And in order to do this, we need transparency. As I just said a few minutes ago, transparency doesn't mean that we are going to make everything explicit to everybody. But we can take transparency in a crisis situation where we don't lie to people. Let's say you are going to, in some scenarios that you have made, you have to downsize your organization, you have to fire people. If you're just having a town hall meeting and if you're if somebody asks you a question, are you going to fire anybody? Is there going to be downsizing? Don't lie to them. Don't lie to them and say, no, we are not going to do this. Maybe you can say something like this, yes, in some scenarios, we could have a possibility like this, but we are trying everything to not this to happen. And you can also try to make them, involve them in the common goal that you are trying to achieve, so that they can also contribute to the destiny of their selves and also their organizations. And we know that people are following leaders who are really trustable, who are also transparent and sincere about themselves and the situation. People are not trusting and following leaders who are just making fake, powerful or very good sentences. And as Inanc mentioned in some of the examples, don't also forget the social media. It's very important to deal with. Yeah. And you know, when the team is ready and when they are working in order to stabilize the situation, actually it is somehow that they are running sprints. What do the teams do? They gather information, they analyze and assess the consequences of those informations. They always make the plans again and again. So they replan and they make a new prioritization and they act accordingly. And according to the results of their act and according to the new external information that is coming from the teams and other stakeholders, they are running the sprints again. When we are working with organization about Agile, we always recommend them to have a, in some stable intervals like weekly sprints or bi-weekly sprints. But in crisis management, it's a little bit different. You cannot set like a daily sprint. Sometimes moment to moment, you have to run a sprint because when a critical information is coming, you have to come together as a team and go through the cycle in order to really act in the best mindful way. Yeah. If we go to the other one, yeah. And hopefully in crisis management, when you reach the stabilization phase, it is very important to focus on, as Inanc also mentioned, the post-crisis development. Crisis situations are situations where you can really very fastly assess your organization. Sometimes we pay lots of money to consultants or assessment centers to assess our organizations or people. Okay, what are the strengths or weaknesses of our people? But believe me, when you are going in a crisis, very quickly, like a little litmus paper, you know it, right? You just put it in, let's say, it's in some water, it says if it is basic or acidic, you know, in like few seconds. The crisis is something like this. It's really assessing your organization in a very quick way. And it's very important to have those evaluations, lessons learned from the crisis. What are the weaknesses? What are the strengths? And assess your organizational resilience with these evaluations. And use your collective wisdom. So not only management making the plans for the future, but use your collective wisdom, your employees, your stakeholders that you can include to overview your strategic positioning and purpose and define it once more. Define your development plans according to your evaluations and get prepared to new crisis, possible crisis, because unfortunately in this VUCA world we could have new crises that we could face, maybe with even some simulation workshops.
All right, so just to give you a brief overview, what is the point of applying Agile to crisis management? And we've heard a few examples. In the system slide, the overview slide, you already saw the OODA loop. So that would be the point of using Agile is that we can use it on the one hand as an operating model to process that loop very quickly. But what we're also looking for is the culture that goes along with Agile, as Sebnem and Inanc mentioned, a culture of transparency, a culture around clear goals, and also to bring these multidisciplinary teams, these cross-functional teams together and work actively with your stakeholders. Traditionally, crisis management is done with internal stakeholders in mind, but please, when we refer to Agile crisis management, we also very much take into account what the external stakeholders require. Critically, we're also in constant communication. That needs to be consistent. Naturally, we don't want to send messages, but rather than communicating very sparsely, we try to communicate continuously. When I say we can use Agile as an operating model, various Agile frameworks as an operating model, we can use a crisis backlog prioritization system and decomposition in order to do rapid prioritization and decision making and translating them into team action. Now, what that means is we can use the speed and autonomy of Agile teams or a team of teams, if you're facing a particularly large crisis, to work on issues very quickly and relatively independently. Now, that also means we can employ Agile scaling patterns. What does that mean? We can effectively use roll-up structures, central sprint planning and the like, to build a structure that rapidly allows us to decomposition our backlog towards multiple teams, prioritize and reprioritize should the need arise. Now, of course, that also means we'll run into several impediments along the way. So typically we'd have a structure in place that would allow us to signal impediments at least every day, but ideally even a lot sooner, and roll these up to the appropriate people as rapidly as we can. The point, of course, is to be able to get ahead of the crisis, to respond as quickly as we can, and by doing so, by rapidly learning iteratively, learn faster than the crisis can actually develop. Inanc?
Yes, we have talked a lot on our model, and Michiel added how Agile can add value on that. There are many challenges in crisis situation, of course. We didn't write all of them here, but we just wanted to share some crucial parts here, especially in the communication teams and employees. Some of them we already mentioned, but we think that it's worth to repeat it maybe in a summary. For example, for the communication part, as Sebnem said, we need to give the correct information on time, but we need to cascade it very neatly. You cannot give all the information to everybody at the same time. If you do that, you will increase the chaos and you will increase the panic between the stakeholders. You need the collaborative knowledge, of course. You need multidisciplinary teams and knowledge from other stakeholders, but be prepared that you will face with the resistance at the beginning, and you will need to spend special time for these stakeholders to persuade it. And we can, without doing that persuasion, if you don't do it, you may face further problems in the very near future. Regarding to teams, we said that the crisis desk, the core crisis team will not be enough to manage the whole crisis, especially you are working internationally. You will need the team of teams, but you will not have time to train the teams within a crisis situation. So the people will need to learn on the job. Because of that reason, the core crisis team should be established very efficiently and work very effectively. That is one of the main challenge. The informal leaders, we completely advise to use these informal leaders. It is very, very crucial to manage well of a crisis situation. But these informal leaders also can be detractors of your companies. Their engagement level can be so low, so you cannot convince them to work with you. So there is also another challenge that you need to overcome, but it's worth. Regarding the employees, of course, in order to survive and to continue your operation, you will need your employees. At least to some extent, they will need to perform. But they're also human beings, like all of us, and we all have emotions, and we will act, especially in crisis situations. We will behave completely affected by our emotions. So we will not be able to think so rationally always. So to balance the sentiment, it's very important, and you will also need to spend time on that. Yes. The next slide. Yes, we are living in a VUCA world. VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. We always say that Agile, in the end of the day, the management approach of the VUCA world. But VUCA world means that we should be ready for the crisis. So we cannot foresee everything at the same time. So we need to adapt ourselves very quickly to the new environment. And the crisis environment also, it's like that. The thing which is important about the crisis situations, the price of failure is much higher than the normal situation. Because of that reason, it's important to be as prepared as possible before the crisis happens. Because of that reason, the scenario planning is important for us, at least to mitigate the impact of a crisis after it occurs. Because during a crisis, you will pass to the survival mode, and the primary objective for yourself and for your organization will be to survive. And to survive, you will act very quickly. And if you are not prepared for that, you may give some wrong decision. But after the crisis is end, when the hard times are left behind, the businesses, the organizations will have to face all the decisions that they have made during the crisis. For example, if your company didn't care about their employees, they didn't care about their supply chain, they try to cheat on customers because of the crisis things, and try to make a benefit out of it. When everything is finished, they will need again their suppliers, their stakeholders, and their workforce. And it will be really hard for them to repair everything that they had done. But on the other hand, if you manage it well, as much as you can, in the end of the day, you will have really effective and resilient teams, and they are worth of gold. And I can say that from my own experience that your customers will be much happier than before. So that's from my side.
All right. As you will have noticed, there's far too much information to go into during just this webinar. This is why we're also offering a one-day training split up into two parts. If you like, you can find more information about this training on the website you see below. What we'll do during this training is explore all of these crisis phases and put them into practice, to see how your organization could better prepare for the next crisis, because of course a crisis is always coming, it is very much inevitable. How to manage during the crisis, but also how to use the crisis to come out of it as a better organization, as Inanc just described. We're looking for a small group. This will be an interactive training. We'll combine all our theoretical knowledge, the ample experiences you've just heard, and we're also hoping to integrate some of your own experiences. So should you have interest in these trainings, please contact us or subscribe directly via the website. At this point, I would like to open the floor to some of the questions. Some questions have been coming in via chat, and of course, they're never the easy ones. So let's go into Gürün's questions first, and if I may rephrase that question. So a crisis management is a lot of work, but it's like making warm coats in summer. I love that analogy. So how can you convince people to spend the money on this? So to paraphrase, clearly crisis management is important, but is it always urgent? And what can you do to keep it high on the corporate agenda?
Yeah, what I can say to this, actually, if you're in a crisis, you have to somehow act. And maybe this is the time that the companies really very quickly spare some money for crisis management, because already their supply chain is affected. They cannot supply goods maybe or services. So they know, they feel that they cannot live if they do not manage the crisis. But I get your question, how to get prepared for crisis, right? Maybe if we answer it in that sense, you are very right. When everything is going fine and when everything is, let's say, under the carpet, the bad things are under the carpet, it's not easy to convince the managers to get prepared for possible crisis. But maybe sometimes the bad things lead to good things, right? This pandemic crisis, for example, none of us would have imagined we could live something like this. But after this one, after we have everybody experienced this, not only in our brains, but also physically, we are currently experiencing this hard crisis situation. I think it would be more easy for managers to think about, and it's easy for us to convince them that we need to get prepared for the new crisis.
Yeah. And I also add some small things. When I read these questions, I also liked very much winter coat in a summer. Why do you need to spend so much money on that? Indeed, I don't know if it is too much money, by the way, because I think it's a balance. When I read these questions, I just remembered Bill Gates' speech. Nowadays, I think some of you also saw it in 2015 or in 2017. I don't remember it, but he had already warned the world about the pandemic crisis possibility and requested that the people get ready for that. And now he's saying that during that time, I said that the economic burden of this crisis would extend to more than 4 trillion, am I saying wrong, right? US dollar. So it's a huge amount of money. And now people don't know still to what extent this budget loss, economical disaster will be. But we all are really aware individually the loss is unbelievable. So I think that it's worth to spend money on winter coat during summer. And by the way, we are not still in the summer, but Sebnem, I agree with Sebnem, we all felt for the first time globally at the same time, from Turkey to Netherlands to USA to China, we all sit at our home and everything is closed. We are almost locked down. So I think that from now on, nobody will try to avoid the budget to spend on that. The winter coat is the most important thing.
My answer to that would also be, would in fact be twofold. The fact that there is no crisis currently doesn't mean you shouldn't work on agile crisis management, meaning a crisis is coming. Well, as Inanc mentioned, this crisis was very much unavoidable. We were unsure when it was going to happen, but the fact that we have this pandemic was always going to happen. It could have happened 10 years down the line. It could have happened a number of years ago, but it is going to happen. There's a 100% chance of that. The other answer to this would be the Agile answer. Some of you might be familiar with, I think it's a Netflix program called Chaos Monkey, meaning a crisis or preparing for a crisis can be used as a stress test. Netflix has a program called Chaos Monkey, and what it does all day is quite literally pull down systems in Netflix, meaning the systems they build have to be resilient enough to boot themselves up again. So by preparing for a crisis, by running scenarios in the preparatory phases, you will be a better company. I was at ING for a while, and what they've done, well, if you have the ING app, what they've done, they've tested going live every day with the ING banking app. They don't go live every day because that would be annoying to customers. But by doing so, by building the technology to be able to go live every day, they've become a much better company, and they've become much more resilient to shocks. So if something does go wrong, the infrastructure is in place to move very quickly. And I think that in itself can be very valuable, even outside crisis situations.
Second question.
Yeah, let's move to the second question. I think that's the one on, let's see.
Yeah.
I think so. So I'll read it out. What if you're one of the leaders involved in a crisis management team, but the rest of the team doesn't agree with being upfront and giving transparent and regular communication? What can you do? Well, there's another difficult question.
Yeah, what I can say to Anita, I have faced this situation, and that's why I'm also saying that sometimes crises are like assessment centers. Normally, the ones who are talking very, powerfully and with confidence, when there's a crisis and when they have to endorse hard conditions, go out on a, let's say, town hall meeting and really connect with people and answer instant and hard questions, maybe that leader doesn't know the answers, it's not very easy. So you really see which are the people who can deal with uncertainties, which are the people who can be really sincere and say that the answer, I don't know also this answer. You see these people, and whatever what you can do to also gain the other ones is you can also maybe coach them one-to-one. What is the thing that they are trying to avoid? What is their worry in not showing up in front of people? One of the things that I was doing like a second role when I was in the crisis management team was this, coaching the leaders who are in front and having communications, because they have to really embody what they are going to say, and also coach the ones, maybe not calling it coaching, but really sincere talks with the other team members to really gain them, to really manage their emotions and really make them reach their inner strengths, actually.
I can say, I guess Anita also is asking, the leader agrees about the communication, but the other stakeholders within the team are not agree about it, if I understand the question.
Transparent communication, yeah.
Yes, to what extent this transparency will be. As you can remember, one of the main key challenges during the crisis is communication. And we said that communication doesn't mean that everything will be open to everybody. It's already there. First of all, you need to have a good communication expert there, crisis management team, within the crisis management team, how you will cascade this communication. So if you begin with this experience, you will persuade these team leaders, team members that are not convinced about open communication. So you need an experienced communication manager there, or expert, whatever you say. And also I mentioned that you will need to persuade, to convince the people. You will face with the resistance. And yes, you are right. This resistance even can come from your own team at the hardcore, but you will need to spend time with that. And during that phase, this coaching also, yes, works. But besides coaching also, you need to talk to the head and heart of these people. Because as long as you cannot convince the whole team to go forward to a common goal, you can have a problem. But the good thing with the crisis is during the crisis, people are not stupid. And if you can explicitly explain them how to proceed further, how to analyze the situation, they will understand it. And during all this experience that we faced, sometimes really crises connect people in much faster time. So you should be careful. You need to talk to the head and heart of the people, and it will work in the end of the day. If it doesn't work, there should be some problem with that person.
I think it's also important to remember that in crisis situations, we're talking about agile crisis management here, but it does not preclude hierarchy. So to put this quite bluntly, crisis management is not a full-on democracy situation, meaning there is, let's not call it command and control, but let's call it, what the army would call it, command and accountability, which is something slightly different. So there are clear assignments, but there is ultimately a single point of responsibility. That might also answer part of your question. It's about 4 to 12, so let's move on to the next question. Let's see. How about convincing the management to establish a crisis team to manage the crisis in family-owned companies?
What is the need, Özeren? This question comes to my mind. So what is the thing that you see that there is a need for crisis management team, but they don't see? What is the thing there?
I think it is a mute.
I think that, this question might need some elaboration.
Because Özeren sees the need, but the other ones don't, right?
Let's see, there are answers coming in. The wait and see mentality. Yes. All right. The point about agile crisis management or crisis management in general, can you afford not to have a crisis team? Meaning, even if there's currently not a crisis situation, I will guarantee that at some point during your organization's existence, you will run into a crisis. And if it's one of the bigger ones, that will threaten the very existence of your organization. Now, if that is not important enough to you as an organization, to put aside your differences, then let me make this quite blunt. Maybe your organization should not exist in the first place, because if you're unwilling to do what is required, you will succumb, and I will guarantee that. Now that's the very blunt answer, but maybe Sebnem, you're smiling. Maybe you have a slightly.
Yeah, actually, what the thing that comes to me is that I just really want to have a private talk with Özeren to really listen to her needs and why the organization is in the wait and see mode. Because if really there is crisis and if really the company is affected, and if I'm the owner of the company, I cannot just wait and see, right? Because I will lose money, I will lose my organization, all the investment that I have done here. So we need a little bit more information to really help Özeren, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
because nobody wants to lose money and team during the crisis, and you can, even you are a family-owned company, you wouldn't wait and see your loss.
Okay.
All right. So feel free to contact us after the webinar as well with any of your questions. But for now, let's move on to the next one.
Yes. But by the way, Barış Kütahya is my lovely colleague from my first company. Hello, Barış. It's really nice to see you here. So let me take this question. Okay?
Yes, please do.
The reactors and the detractors, you are right, they are very crucial, and what could be the good thing and motivating way to win them? But when I was the HR manager for the country operations during the crisis, and when we defined the detractors, what we did was, for example, one thing, I was personally contacting these people, and I was really trying to understand what is the why they are resisting, what are the assumptions they have, what are the worries they have about the people, because most of the time these informal leaders are not only thinking about themselves but the other ones, so they are really leading ones. So what are their worries about the other ones? And I really very sincerely shared our intention. Okay, we don't want a downsizing, but we are doing this and this. We need you. We need your involvement. So these kind of personal talks and giving them a lot of information, real, transparent information to the extent that we can share, made really, gain these people. And they worked, then they become not detractors, but the ambassadors for the management. And they really worked really hard for the communication and engagement parts during crisis management. I hope this helped.
Yeah, I think it was a very good answer. Yeah. As a question from Aylin, I propose we keep this webinar open for another 10 minutes to see if we can answer any questions. So that will be 12 at the latest. Question from Aylin. Some companies have junior management members or are not organized well enough to support the organization in a crisis. So that leans toward learned helplessness, even at the management level. How do you shake it off? That's a very good question there. And one of the scary ones, I think. I think this is definitely where something like structure or an organizational system like Agile can help. It puts the responsibility, the accountability for these type of things in the right place, but it also empowers your people. In my personal experience, many people are given responsibility, but are not empowered to act. Meaning, this is when you see situations like learned helplessness develop. My first question in those situations would be, what would these junior management members need to feel confident to act? Could it have something to do with psychological safety? What happens if they make the wrong decisions? As Inanc mentioned, of course, the price of failure is very much exacerbated in crisis situations, but I feel it's probably even worse to not act. This is definitely where I would go as a starting point. Find out what motivates them or actually demotivates them.
And they could also get some external help, of course, but in order for them to reach for help, they need to be aware that they are currently, whatever the reason is, but they are not capable of managing this alone. So we have to somehow, with facts and figures, maybe comparing with other crisis management teams in other organizations, or the risks that they are not aware of, we have to make them aware that they need something to change the way that they are currently working, external help or courage, whatever it is. We need awareness there.
Okay. Let's see, that's a question from Wojtek, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. In terms of the Agile part of crisis management, do you recommend any specific framework like Scrum or just Agile? Sort of depends on the situation, but I would recommend not sticking to Scrum specifically, but definitely be inspired by Scrum, but take all the practices from various frameworks and apply them to your situation. So when scaling your crisis team, I like to refer to Scrum at Scale, which has a very effective way of doing so, which is something we will explore in the training. Stand-ups apply to many different frameworks, but depending on the level of urgency, Scrum might cause too much overhead. So at this point, you might refer to disciplines like Kanban for continuous flow, or something like some principles from, we're getting pretty nerdy here, extreme programming can also help you. Do have a basic framework in place as a starting point, but strive also to adapt that to your situation as it develops. If you're scaling up, it helps to have a concrete idea in place of how you would scale your communications. That is something I would definitely recommend.
Yeah, and in addition to what you have said, and I also seen the next question, I think coming from Zitske,
yeah.
if I pronounce it right. Maybe don't think that we are trying to build up any tool or make the team learn an agile tool. We are just trying to work with the agile approach, the agile mindset. So what does it bring? It brings trust. It brings transparency as much as possible. It brings the cycle mind. So okay, what we do something, we learn from it, and then we act again. We get information, we learn from it, we replan, we act, and this iteration. So these kind of mindsets and principles, actually, we are trying to introduce. We have to introduce in a crisis to really manage it well. Not the tools.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely a very good point by Sebnem. So it's not about using the tools per se. We can definitely use visual management techniques. We can use communication techniques, but it's about shared responsibility and will to act.
Yeah, but by the way, in addition to Yitzke's question, maybe it will be better that the teams are already trained a little bit about agile tools in advance in order to be prepared for the next crisis. Because if they know a little bit more information about agile frameworks, and especially agile mindset, that will help a lot to proceed further during the crisis times also. So this is also a preparation phase.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've worked with a lot of teams in various organizations, and what I see in comparison, the teams that are working in an agile way, and some other teams that are not in the same organization, the agile teams tend to have a structure in place, a way of communication, a way of making their work transparent. And what I've seen, so we've been in a lockdown of sorts here for about 2 to 3 weeks now in the Netherlands. What I've seen with the agile teams I've been coaching, they've responded within a day or sometimes 2. Many of the other teams I've seen in organizations around me as well, let's not point fingers. I've seen organizations that have taken 2 weeks to set up their first video conference. This is not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is people that show entrepreneurship, if you will, and that take on the challenge. And this is typically something I would associate with agile teams. So ideally, of course, this would be in place. But as you mentioned, you can always use, you can also use this as a driver for agility. Never before has the need for agility and resilience rather than robustness been so apparent. You know, this is a cliche, but never waste a good crisis. So if there's something you could benefit from in the long term, I think everyone can see the value of very clear and concise communication and a highly structured way of working in a crisis situation. And if they enjoy this, if this is effective for your particular organization, why not take it from the crisis and bring it to your real life work?
Yeah.
Let's see, do we have any other questions?
We are getting the thank yous and the record,
Yeah.
asking for the record.
Yeah. Questions.
Yeah. I think we are done with the questions, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right, then I would like to thank you very much for attending, all of you. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn as well. And should you wish to explore this further, please do not hesitate to ask your questions about the training that is coming up, or subscribe directly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for participation. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.